Welcome to Unity of Wilmington. My name's Reverend Mindy Tucker, and I am co-minister here. The speaker today is Reverend Nickie Golden, co-minister. Our vocalist is the incredible Meagan Golden on keyboards, Paul Miller, Jon Hill on drums, and Justin Lacy on guitar. And we're all here to welcome and honor the spiritual seeker that you are. We're here to remind you that you are a beloved expression of God, that you are in the right place at the right time, and that you're here for a holy purpose. And we're so grateful for this connection.
Just beginning to unfold. So let it all unfold. Far beyond all reason in your mind, there's a world mysterious there for you to find. All these questions that we always have, all we are is curious. There's nothing wrong with that. So go round every corner, search every part of the sky, 'cause a life that's full of wonder is a wonderful life. Dig beneath the surface, find there's lessons there to learn. Then dig deeper. Feed your intuition, find there's any stone unturned. Be the seeker of the truth. Listen when you hear it calling you. Know it's calling you. Far beyond all reason in your mind, there's a world mysterious there for you to find. All these questions that we always have, all we are is curious. There's nothing wrong with that. So go round every corner, search every part of the sky. It's a life that's full of wonder. It's a wonderful life. It's a wonderful life. It's a wonderful life. It's a wonderful life.
As we
continue to live this wonderful life. We're going to explore well-being today, that inner well-being. A definition that I like to use is that our inner world and our outer world find congruency when we are experiencing well-being. And from that place, we have a sense of harmony because that insides and our outsides are matching. When we're feeling satisfied with life, it's usually because we're experiencing a sense of inner well-being. Inner well-being takes self-reflection and self-awareness. It invites us into taking a deep dive, a look into our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings, our responses, and that noticing of the moments when we react versus respond. And when we can do that with a sense of love, when we can do that from a place of compassion for ourselves, it's a time of learning. And the more open we are to simply learning, what can I learn from this is one of my favorite questions, then the more open we can be to well-being. I want to give you some characteristics of well-being. This was developed by Gay and Katie Hendricks. Experiencing ease and flow in mind and body. When we're experiencing that ease and flow in our mind and in our body, we are what some psychologists call in the zone. We're in the flow of life, is how Reverend Eric Butterworth would talk about that. But that ease and flow, where our thinking is moving with ease within our mind. It's not like, I don't know if you ever have monkey mind sense or chatterbox mind, some people call it, where it seems like you just cannot shut it off. But when we're in a state of well-being, that mind flows with greater ease. We all have what I call an essence pace, that pace at which we do things in our own natural rhythm. This is a pace where we can be moving through a crowd of people, but not run into people. I've done this in New York City when I used to live there. I would get centered before I left my house, and I would walk through the city streets at rush hour at times and just other times. I would walk through the streets and I would see if I could be aware of as much as I could be aware of, be present to the moment, but moving at a pace that worked for me. And when we can move into that essence pace, we're able to flow with life. We're less likely to bump into people or be bumped into. If people do bump into us, it's usually because they're out of their essence pace and in their head or in their mind, or sometimes not even present to the now moment. And what we know here is that the now moment is the only true moment we have. It's the only true reality. So finding that place of ease and flow, this is what I think meditation does for me. This is what relaxation does, is assist us in finding that ease and flow. This is when doing things that we love to do. Like I love to go and sit by the ocean. I like to walk by the ocean. And after about 5 minutes in that ocean space, being able to walk, I find that sense of ease and flow, that sense of inner well-being emerges from within me. It's always there. It's just sometimes covered over by other things that I allow to be more important in my life. Another one is seeing the possibilities in life. When we are in that state of inner well-being, it's much easier to see potentiality and possibilities and get excited about those possibilities. When change begins to happen, it's not so much like, let me, hang on and, hold my feet down, so I have to be dragged into the next moment. But when we're in that state of inner well-being, we can go, wow, here it comes again. Something different is going to happen. And we can be open to possibilities. We can actually be excited about the change that's happening. And there's all kinds of change that can happen that brings us into the state of possibility. It doesn't have to be huge changes. It could be the weather is changing right now. We're in the season of spring and we're moving into it. So here come the flowers. Here come the beautiful trees that are beginning to blossom. The green grass is coming up. Some people don't like this time of year. That's not true for me. I love spring. But as it begins to flow, even the time change that's happening today, we're here an hour earlier than we would normally be because we've taken this made-up thing called time and we've shifted it. Sometimes when we're not in a state of well-being, these small changes that are out of our control can create difficulties. They can create anxiety, they can create depression, it can create anger within us that emerges from us, sadness, fear. And yet when we're in a state of well-being, it's much easier to navigate the things that emerge in life, the regular things. When we're in a state of well-being, it's much easier to navigate the obstacles that come up in life. And sometimes obstacles happen. Being on a spiritual path is not always about happiness and joy. Joy is always within us, just as inner well-being is always within us. But sometimes in the process of living, in the process of our past history, in the process of our experiences, we let that get covered up, the joy and the well-being, because of something that happened. And we have a reaction to that something that happens. The beautiful thing is, as we're in a state of well-being, we can begin to remember how to come home to that state of well-being with great ease. Trusting our inner guidance and our intuition is one of those ways to come home. When we spend time reflecting that inner self, when we spend time examining our thoughts and our feelings, wow, is this the current version of me? Do I still believe this? Oh, I wonder when I started thinking this. So we can take a look at what's happening and decide, does this fit my inner well-being or not? And if it does, keep it and do more of it. If it doesn't, let it go. Because part of finding our way, that through line in our inner well-being, is looking at the parts of us that we have collected, the parts of us that we have gathered in the process of living that have steered us off the path of joy, that have steered us off the path of love. To examine them and decide, do I want to continue in this manner, or do I want to do something different in my life so I can experience greater well-being? And part of that is learning how to listen within, to hear the inner guidance that's available to us, to find the way in which we experience our own intuition. For me, sometimes it's a voice that's in my head. It usually comes in the left part from behind, but I hear it very clearly. Sometimes it's just a sense. The other day, I was leaving here, actually, and headed home, and for some reason, I just had the impulse to turn left instead of right, like I normally would. And then I just thought, well, I had that impulse, I'm going to follow it. And then another impulse was turn right here, and I followed that. And I went home a different way, but all based on the impulse within me. And it was nice to go home a different way. I was out of the typical habit because I listened to that inner impulse. So often we get into habits. I have been known at times to get in those kind of habits of driving home from wherever I work or wherever I go from one place to home quite regularly, and have moved homes and live in a different part of town and find myself heading back to a place I once lived going, oh, wait, I'm going the wrong direction, and having to turn around and get present with myself again and begin to move forward. When we're willing to tune in, to allow that voice, that sense, however we experience our intuition to come forth, and we follow it, it becomes clearer to us. And as our intuition and inner guidance becomes clearer to us, then our inner well-being expands and grows. And the fourth point of noticing our inner well-being, one of the ways that we know we're in that place, is we can flourish in any environment. We can flourish in any environment. We can go into a noisy, crowded place and find our center. We can go to wherever that happy place is, whether it's the ocean or whether it's the forest or whether it's some other place for you sitting on a rock in the sunshine. We can go there and find our inner well-being with ease. But when we can take that inner well-being, that sense of centeredness, that sense of groundedness, and take it with us anywhere we go, that's a possibility. When we can do that, we can flourish wherever we are. It's a practice, but it really is a possibility when we practice it. Now, John DeMartini says that we all have the potential for greatness. We all have the potential for greatness and the capacity to leave a legacy, to remember that when we're gone from this planet because we have shimmered off into the universe, that there's some part of us that's here that's remaining. Oftentimes, that's the love that other people have for us. But we all have this capacity to leave a legacy. But so often we dishonor our true radiant self and those we love by not giving ourselves permission to shine. Would you be willing, beginning in this moment, to give yourself permission to shine, to give yourself permission to live your biggest and fullest life, to be who you came here to be on this planet? Whatever that is, to allow your natural gifts to come forward and to be expressed as you in this world. Sometimes we look at things like, oh, I'd like to write a book, and then I hear myself and other people say, oh, but I don't have anything new to say. But you have something to say in your own unique way that no one else could say, because they're not you. Sometimes we look at somebody and says, oh man, they play piano better than I do. I could never play that well, so let me not even try. Or singing, or art, painting, music, all of that. And it could even be teaching, or what we do at our job. That belief within us that somebody else can do it better sometimes keeps us from allowing ourselves to shine as fully as we possibly can. At other times we've been told, well, don't show what you can do because other people won't like you, or other people will think I have been called teacher's pet before, or like brown nosing. People will think you're trying to show off, and yet we're being called in this universe to live as fully as we can, to allow our light to shine, to be the biggest and best expression of ourselves that we can be. And when we're allowing that flow from within us to occur, we come into a sense of well-being. There might be a few obstacles and belief systems that we have to examine. We might have to be able to stand in our power against somebody else's opinion, because they think that we shouldn't be as radiant as we are. And yet, oftentimes, what's happening for that person that's judging us for our own radiance is that they're afraid to allow their radiance to come forth. If we could see the light that we all are, we would be amazed. And when we're willing to look within and see the light that we are amazing. We are awesome people. Some of the obstacles that we put in our way is we fail to see ourselves as whole. We develop habits that do not serve us, and we have difficulty standing in our power. We are already whole. We were born on this planet being whole. We are wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y, ourselves. That is part of the fully divine, fully human essence that we are by the very fact that we are here. But sometimes we've had experiences where other people have told us that we're less than whole, and we have taken those on. Other times we have experiences where we compare and judge ourselves. We criticize ourselves for something that's going on within us. We shouldn't be. We think we're too much, or we think we're too little, or we think we're not enough. All of those are ways in which we allow ourselves to not live fully into our wholeness, to not live fully into the radiance that we are. And yet I believe that we are called daily by our experiences to allow ourselves to shine, to step into it. And sometimes it's a little scary to do, but to truly step into it, to notice what limits ourselves, to notice the thoughts that we have that hold us back. I want to share a story with you from a TED Talk that I watched recently. The TED Talk was done by a psychologist. His name is Guy Winch. And if you go to a TEDx and put in Guy Winch, you can see this TED Talk. He came to the United States to study psychology, actually. And he had a twin brother who was studying in another country. And this was before Skype, this was before FaceTime, this was before the internet was popular. But they were both on different continents, the Atlantic Ocean between them. It was the first time in their life they'd ever been separated as twin brothers. And it was coming upon their birthday, and it was the first time that they had not been together on their birthday. Now, it was expensive at that time to talk internationally on the telephone. And so each week they set aside funds so that they could talk for 5 minutes to each other. And if you're used to being so connected to somebody and then you're apart, those 5 minutes are very, very precious. But on their birthday, it was coming up, they made the decision that they would spend the money and the time and talk for 10 minutes on their birthday so they could celebrate each other and be together on this first time that they were going to be apart. And so Guy he'd gotten up and he was waiting for his brother's call, and he was pacing the living room, he was pacing the bedroom, he was waiting and he's waiting, and he was getting more frustrated and sad, and he felt the loneliness, and he felt the sadness of being apart from his brother for the very first time on their birthday. And then what began to happen is, in his mind, he was thinking, oh, my brother must be out with other people, he's having the time of his life, he's not even thinking about me, and here I am focused on him and thinking about him. And the day moved on, and the sadness and the loneliness increased, and the thoughts began to increase. Those ruminative thoughts that say we're not good enough, or somebody else likes somebody else better than us. And they continued to increase, and he went to bed sad. And he woke up the next morning, he still had not heard from his brother, and he was just hurting. And he got out of bed, and he looked down, and he recognized that his phone was off the hook. Somewhere in the morning of that pacing, that anxious waiting for his brother's call, he had kicked the phone off the hook, and he replaced it. And almost instantly, when he put the receiver back on the hook and made the ability to have the connection, his phone rang, and it was his twin brother, who was really, really mad. Where have you been? We were supposed to talk to each other. It was our birthday. And Guy shares that he said, well, I was waiting for you to call me, and the phone was off, and I didn't recognize that the phone was off the hook, and his brother was really mad then. What do you mean you were waiting for me to call you? And Guy said, I never even thought to call you. And he was stunned at that. He never even thought to call his brother, although they had an agreement to talk. He was in that place of waiting. What are you waiting for? What are you upset about? That you haven't received attention from somebody, that you're still waiting for it? And what's your purpose? What's your thinking around that waiting? I totally get guys not picking up the phone and calling. I don't tend to be an initiator, but some of that is because I rarely need to be an initiator, because people call me. But I can imagine that if I were waiting for someone's call that was important to me, that I would be wondering, well, how come they haven't called? And what are they doing? And I'm sure they have something better to do. We all know those thoughts that go around and around and around and around in our head and drive us crazy until we learn how to shift that thinking. But so often we don't recognize from the place of our own wholeness that we could pick the phone up and call. We can now pick the phone up and text. We can Skype, we can FaceTime, we can email. There are tons of ways to connect with somebody else. So that when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling that disconnection, we have potentiality of connection. We have ways to connect with somebody. And sometimes it's as simple as being in the grocery store and it's a smile. Sometimes it's as simple as passing somebody on the sidewalk and just saying hello. It can make a difference in somebody's life. But it's important for our well-being to look at, to examine those thoughts that keep us from living in our wholeness, to release those thoughts, to let ourselves begin to radiate forth the light that we are. The universal teacher, Jesus, called us the light of the world. We have these big, bold, radiant light within us that shines. And as we're together, whether that togetherness is in the same room or on the same planet, as we are together, our energies intertwine. Our thoughts can be sent out to another and touch their hearts. There's a neuroeconomist, that was a new term to me recently. His name is Paul Zak. One of the things he's been doing lately is looking at the hormone oxytocin, which makes us feel really good when it's being released in our brains and in our bodies. And what he did was, in the midst of 6 feet of physical distancing, in the midst of lockdowns all across the many countries of the world, Paul Zak began to look at how can we connect with each other. So he set up an experiment where he would have somebody come into his office and have a nurse draw their blood, and they would look at the oxytocin levels in the blood, and also the cortisol, which is the stress hormone levels in the blood. And then they would have somebody talk to somebody that they enjoyed immensely for about 10 minutes on the internet. And then the person, of course, filled out some kind of form reporting on how they felt. And usually on that form, they said, I don't feel any different having talked to somebody across the internet. It's not the same as being in person. And then the nurse would come back and draw some more blood, and they would analyze the blood again for the oxytocin levels and for the cortisol levels. And what Paul Zak discovered in his research was that 10 minutes on the internet was 10 minutes of connection with somebody. And it was a face-to-face connection. And what happened was, even though the person didn't report that they felt different, their oxytocin levels increased by 14%. And their cortisol levels, the stress hormone, decreased by 10%. We are individuals created for connection with each other. And we have been thrown into a situation where that connection is unusual across this last year. And many of us are having that impulse, that desire to gather with families again, together with friends again, to be able to be in the same room with each other. And yet, in order to keep us safe, we haven't necessarily been able to do that. And yet, there are ways when we are flexible, when we are open to possibilities, when we are willing to live in our wholeness, be grounded and centered, That when we connect like we are right here, right now, listening, being present with each other, our oxytocin levels come up, and our cortisol, our stress levels, go down. We are created for connection. And while the connections that we are used to that have been habitual for us are different now, researchers are finding that our bodies are responding with connections on Facebook, with connections on Twitter, with connections on Twitch, on Periscope, on YouTube. That when we connect in these ways, through FaceTime and Skype and Zoom, that our stress levels are decreasing and our feel-good hormones are increasing. A new way, learning a new way. And part of that new way is to take what we know, to learn how to apply it, and then to move that through application from the intellectual knowledge to the innate knowledge, through that application. From knowing to knowing how through application, to really developing an understanding. Does it take mental rehearsal? Yes. But we know what fires together wires together. So when we begin to open to new possibilities and to new ways of being, we are actually creating neural networks in our brains that recognize. So the more we're willing to find new ways of connecting, novel ways of connecting, the more we're willing to initiate that connection with each other, that heart-to-heart connection, we're able to experience greater well-being, more inner well-being. And we can learn from that. We can learn how to stand in our power, to be willing to stand in who we are, to share our light, to allow our opinion to be the most important opinion, to find our own inner approval with our own inner well-being, so that we're not constantly seeking approval from outside ourselves, but from within, from our time in prayer, our time in meditation, from our time in examining who we are, reflecting upon ourselves and seeing the light, focusing on the light that is within us. Gay and Katie Hendricks again say, when you can break through your approval and control programming, that need for something to be as it was is part of our control programming. When we can break through that, there's a natural, organic, spiritual essence within us that can be consciously experienced. That's our inner well-being. It can be consciously experienced by us as we move through and release and let go of that old programming. As long as we try to control ourselves and others, as long as we strive to get others to like us, our spiritual essence is obscured. Standing in our power, recognizing that we're fully divine and fully human, understanding and applying the spiritual tools so that we can create heaven on earth. Remember, heaven is a state of consciousness. And it's going to be different for each of us, but it's our state of consciousness. And as we live in that well-being state of consciousness, as we radiate our lives out, as we radiate our light outwardly, then we can stand in celebration of life and experience the joy of living. I have an affirmation for us to take into meditation. It looks like this: I celebrate my wholeness. I celebrate my wholeness. I celebrate your wholeness. I reflect on my life and let go of anything that no longer serves me. I seek the joy of living every day. I celebrate you. I celebrate me. I celebrate our joy together. Let's take this into a time of reflection, another word for meditation. I'm going to invite you to simply reflect, to tune into your heart space. I'm going to keep my eyes open. You're welcome to keep your eyes open or closed, whatever works best for you. And think about some of the thoughts that you have about yourself. And if you were to make a list later today, which side of things you love about yourself and things you wish were different, which side would be the longest list? My hope for you is that the list that said things I love about myself would take up reams and reams of paper. That you can celebrate yourself in new ways in that manner. That you can draw on that inner well-being that's already within you and call it forth. The beauty of you, the majesty of you, the magnificence of you, the awesomeness of you, the fun of you, the joy of you, the laughter of you, the harmony of you, the peace of you, the divinity of you. Drawing upon those, tuning into our heart space, allowing that love to permeate each cell, each muscle, each open space within us, allowing that inner well-being to bubble forth, to emerge, so that when people look at you, they see your glow. When you look in the mirror, you see your own glow. And as you stand in the beginning of your day, and as you move through that day, you do so with joy, experiencing the joy of living. Experience a connection with your spirit within. Whatever name you use for the divine that is you. And then branching out to really celebrating yourself. And when we can come to that place where we're celebrating ourselves and others, we do find that connection. We find that joy. When we are willing to see our own wholeness, it's easier to see another's wholeness. And this is part of the commandment that we were given, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love ourselves as we love our neighbor, to love ourselves so fully that it's easy to love our neighbor. And who's your neighbor? Everyone on this planet, standing in the consciousness of love, standing in the consciousness of peace, standing in the consciousness of what we can do, open-handed and open-hearted, what we can do to live fully, to love generously, and to be all that we can be.
They'll try to stop the dream we're dreaming. They can't stop us from believing. They will fill your head with doubt, but that won't stop us now. So let them say we can't do it. Put up a roadblock and we'll run right through it, 'cause we can do the impossible. We have the power in our hands. odds are stacked against us, that can't hold us back. We will be relentless. There's a voice they're gonna hear, a voice so loud and clear. So let them say we can't do it. Put up a roadblock and we'll run right through it, 'cause we can do the impossible. We have the power in our hands, and we won't stop, 'cause we've got to make a difference in this life. With one voice, one heart, two hands, we can. We're gonna make a change today, because we have the faith it takes to win this race. So let them say we can't do it. Put up a roadblock and we'll run right through it.
Thank you for joining Unity of Wilmington today. We hope that you have reminded yourself that there's only one presence and one power active in your life and in the universe right here, right now. We appreciate you sharing your love offerings, your gifts of tithes at www.unitywill.com.
And we invite you to see yourself as whole, to live as fully as you can in the radiant light that you were born with and came here to be. Reflect upon and let go of anything that gets in way of that light, and live fully, love generously, and
We
have fun.
Celebrate you.
We can do the impossible. We have the power in our hands, and we won't stop, 'cause we've got to make a difference in this life. With one voice, one heart, two hands, we can. I can do the